This is BBC One. Now the BBC News with Sean Williams.
The Trade Secretary demands compensation from BMW for dumping Rover. Talks get underway in Birmingham to help those workers under threat. Taiwan elects a president who wants independence, defying Chinese threats. And the murder of a woman and her 2 children. A man's being questioned. Good evening. The government says it'll ask BMW for money to help Rover workers in Birmingham find new jobs. The Trade and Industry Secretary Stephen Byers was speaking after the first meeting of a special task force set up to deal with the expected job losses from the sale of the Longbridge car plant. Mr. Byers said BMW had a responsibility to help regenerate the local area.
Like a latter-day Pied Piper trailing money and promises, the Trade Secretary Stephen Byers continued his progress through the Midlands today. The government task force, whose first meeting he attended, will have to act quickly if it's to lessen the impact of expected job losses at Rover's Longbridge plant. After the meeting, Mr. Byers called on BMW to pay compensation for what had happened at Longbridge.
They've acted in a way which most people regard as unacceptable. They've kept the workforce and the government in the dark about their intentions. And I think they've got a responsibility here which they need to discharge. And they need, I think, to join with us and make a contribution towards our efforts to regenerate the local economy.
25,000 jobs could go in the West Midlands, counting those like component makers who depend on orders from Longbridge. The government's promised £129 million in cash and fast access to new jobs and training. But will it work? Well, this factory in the northeast of England is being cited as the model. When the electronics firm Fujitsu closed it down in 1998, a government task force was set up here too. Within a year, over 90% of the 600-strong workforce found new jobs.
I think the difficulty is raising expectations too high so far as the existing workforce are concerned, and the time scale that may be involved. Obviously, the workforce aren't going to walk into jobs on day one. And as in the northeast, it took up to a year. It may take a similar amount of time.
The speed of Rover's breakup can still shock. Newspapers today contained leaflets advertising Rover cars under the slogan, "The winner takes it all," a fact of which the losers at Longbridge are only too aware. Greg Wood, BBC News.
The pro-independence candidate Chen Shui-bian has won the Taiwanese presidential election. The campaign had been overshadowed by threats from China, which considers Taiwan to be a Chinese province. Beijing had threatened military action if the Taiwanese elected a candidate who wanted to break away. Tonight, China said it'll still never allow independence, but it would be open to dialogue with the new president. From Taiwan, our correspondent Jill McGivering reports.
A jubilant crowd overwhelmed by a landmark victory. Tens of thousands of people flooded Taipei's streets to honour their new president. After 50 years, the ruling party was out. Taiwan has embraced democracy by voting for change.
I'm very excited and proud of tonight's result because this is the first victory that the Taiwanese has chosen our own ideal president.
The next president, Chen Shui-bian, sent a clear message to mainland China as he accepted victory. Taiwan wants peace, but only on its own terms. Taiwan rejected China's plan for reunification, he said. The one country, two systems formula used to take back Hong Kong wasn't acceptable here. But the leadership in Beijing sees the reunification of China as a matter of urgent national pride. Hong Kong and Macau have returned to the fold. Now their sights are set firmly on Taiwan. They threaten to use military force to block any moves towards independence. For the Taiwanese, the aggression across the water means a constant state of alert. When Beijing starts saber-rattling on Taiwan, it sends shockwaves through the whole region. Taipei depends on powerful allies. The United States provides military hardware and a promise of support if angry words escalate into crisis. Tonight, the people of Taiwan are eager to celebrate. They're full of the joys of being a young democracy, of having the right to choose. but they're yet to find out what price they will be forced to pay for this gesture of defiance against Beijing. Jill McGivering, BBC News, Taipei.
Police hunting the killer of a mother and 2 children in Berkshire are still questioning a man arrested this morning. The emergency services were called to a house in Bracknell yesterday by a 999 call from one of the youngsters. But when they got there, all 3 were dead.
It wasn't until this morning that police were able to remove the bodies. 2 children and their mother who'd been stabbed to death in what the police described as an atrocious crime. Shazia Zaidi, a social worker at a local hospital, along with her 6-year-old son Zisham and 7-year-old daughter Saba, had been murdered in their home in Bracknell in Berkshire yesterday afternoon. According to the police, one of the children made a desperate 999 call during the attack. Police arrived within 10 minutes, but only to make the grim discovery.
This is a horrendous offence, or offences, absolutely tragic, with 2 small children, especially with 2 small children being involved.
While police launched a massive hunt for the killer, which led to an arrest, shocked neighbours brought flowers to the home as an expression of grief.
We just felt very sad, you know, for the mother and the children, you know. It's a tragic situation, isn't it? You know, hearing, you know, something awful just round the corner from where you live.
Police are still trying to establish a motive for the killings. They say the dead woman was a divorcee. The boy and girl were her only children. Police say the woman and her 2 children moved here to be near to her family. They're said to be devastated. But at this stage, all the police will say about the inquiry is that a 34-year-old man has been arrested and is now being questioned at a local police station about these 3 brutal murders. John McIntyre, BBC News, Bracknell in Berkshire.
The Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy has indicated he's been loosening the party's links with the Labour government. He told members at their spring conference that there would still be joint cabinet committee meetings with ministers to discuss policy, but he played down their significance. Our political editor Robin Oakley reports from the conference in Plymouth.
Showing authority in shirt sleeves is all the fashion among party leaders these days. Liberal Democrats were given free rein to quiz Mr Kennedy. And almost the first subject raised was the future of the Joint Cabinet Committee, on which their leaders have worked with Labour on constitutional reform. His predecessor, Paddy Ashdown, prized it. Mr Kennedy, it seems, can take it or leave it.
I see a continuing role for it. My genuine impression to you is that an awful lot has been made of the Joint Cabinet Committee. It's important and it's useful, but it is by no means the be-all and end-all of trying to influence the government. So it meets once in a while when there's something to be done, but I'm not fixated by it.
The committee's met only once, he disclosed, in the 6 months since he took over. Delegates urged Mr Kennedy to ensure more Lib Dem candidates were women. He offered them new thinking about party conferences, which he called a turn-off for voters.
I would like to see, for example, a leader's speech, where you're actually beaming people in who aren't necessarily Liberal Democrats from all over the place, and putting tough questions to me during the leader's speech. Why not? Why not? Why should I have to stand up there for 40 minutes and go yap, 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 yap?
Today's debates ranged widely, from sheep dip to the global economy. The Lib Dems are looking for a unique selling point to sharpen their identity, and Mr Kennedy hopes that green issues will do the trick in his main speech tomorrow. Robin Oakley, BBC News, Plymouth.
Up to 230 members of a doomsday religious cult in Uganda have died in a blazing church. At first, police thought it was mass suicide, but there are suggestions the leader of the sect may have started the fire himself at the makeshift building in Kanangu after luring his followers inside. It's reported he had encouraged them to sell their possessions in preparation for death. The sect, called the Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God, believed the world would end this year. The Queen has spent a quiet first day in Canberra at the start of her 2-week tour of Australia. It's 4 months since Australians voted to keep her as their head of state. Today, a small group of Republicans demonstrated outside the gates of Government House, where she's staying.
After the long flight from London, this was the Queen's only engagement today. She spent half an hour with her Prime Minister and told him that she was very happy to be back in Australia. Her suite of rooms at Government House overlook 150 acres of garden in which kangaroos and cockatoos abound. As they chatted for the cameras, the Queen said the birds hadn't troubled her sleep.
I'm not waiting by the cockatoos.
No, well,
It's a very Australian summer's morning. I went for an early walk.
She was presented with a flower book to mark her visit, which has been carefully timed between the referendum, which retained her as head of state, and the Olympics in Sydney, which she has not been invited to open. Mr. Howard doesn't believe the timing will prove a source of any embarrassment to the Queen. But outside the gates, a handful of Republicans staged a token protest, the second since she arrived. According to the Prime Minister, though, the Queen is widely regarded as a dedicated and committed monarch.
Australians have always been warm towards her, including many people in Australia who voted for a republic. The Queen as a person has not been the issue in the constitutional debate in Australia.
Over the next fortnight, the Queen and Duke will visit all but 2 of Australia's 6 states. But the pace has been slowed to take account of their age. There are fewer evening engagements than in the past, and their weekends here at Government House have been left largely free so that they can rest. Jenny Bond, BBC News, Canberra.
And that's it from me. George Alagaya is going to be here with the late news tonight at 10:15. Bye-bye for now.
Good evening. Well, for many of us today, it's been a fine day, and once again we saw the top temperature recorded in Aboyne in Aberdeenshire, 14 Celsius, well above average for the time of year. That was all due to sunny skies, and there was certainly a lot of sunshine around during the afternoon, except in the west where we had the thicker cloud. Well, at the moment, out of the window in London, the sun has gone down now, but you can see the moon showing up very clearly there, giving a clear start to the evening. That means temperatures are going to dip away. It also means we're going to find a cloud-free evening. But gradually, the cloud will increase as this weather front comes into the southeast for a time, perhaps bringing the odd spot of light rain and drizzle overnight as well. Up to the northwest, well, here there will be more cloud coming from this weather front and a few spots of drizzle out of that as well. But by far and large, it's high pressure the dominant feature, and so that may just allow some mist and fog to form by the end of the night. Temperatures tonight under that high pressure dropping down to around -1 to -2, but in the southeast and the northwest, here temperatures will stay higher as the winds will be stronger. For Sunday morning, starting a little bit misty then through the Midlands and Lincolnshire, that's soon going, and then the best of the sunshine for the afternoon occurring in the south, the northwest always cloudiest, and top temperatures around 12 to 14. Bye-bye.
What did your kids really learn at school today?
I don't think it's a problem at all. Everyone smokes.
How to smoke?
I'll worry about it when I'm 68 and I've got lung cancer.
What to drink?
I had a glass of red wine.
It used to be just beer. I drank a bottle of champagne.
And I just keep drinking until I'm on the floor already. I was really drunk then.
Where to buy cannabis?
I could get some if I wanted to.
There's so much more around.
From innocence to addiction, old habits start young. Tomorrow at 4:05 on BBC One.
Art Zone on BBC Two. Review courting strong opinions and lively discussion.
We only really know what is new.
Ralph Fiennes stars in How Proust Can Change Your Life.
In love, there is permanent suffering.
We suffer, therefore we think.
His art changed with every new love. One of the 20th century's most controversial artists is profiled in Picasso Days. Art Zone, tomorrow from 7:30 on BBC Two.
And now on BBC One, the Saturday News and Sport from South Today with Steve Humphrey.
Hello, good evening. Buildings in 2 of the South's most historic town centres have been damaged by major fires. This afternoon, over 100 firefighters tackled a blaze in Arundel. The centre of the town had to be evacuated just hours before the West Sussex Brigade had been fighting another fire in the centre of Chichester. The fire in Arundel's High Street, next to Arundel Castle, began just after 1 o'clock this afternoon. Flames spread from a building that houses an antique shop to neighbouring properties. As the extent of the blaze became clear, over 100 firefighters were drafted in, along with specialist equipment, including an aerial platform from Worthing. To extinguish the flames, fire crews had to break their way into roof spaces.
The fire was quite a severe fire. When crews from Arundel initially arrived, they were faced with a developing fire affecting the 3rd floor and the roof of the antique shop. Crews immediately entered the building with breathing apparatus because it was initially thought that persons may be inside.
It was the second major incident for West Sussex crews in 12 hours. Last night, 120 firefighters were in Chichester, battling to prevent a fire in the Punch House pub spreading along East Street. More than 100 customers got out safely after the fire started. The building was severely damaged and the cause is being investigated. A Berkshire-based internet company has been sold for £60 million. Smart Groups in Newbury, which was launched less than a year ago, was set up by two software engineers who wanted to coordinate their hobbies. They created a website where leaders of groups and clubs could post information. It's been a commercial success because it allows advertisers to reach their target audiences. All 28 employees will keep their jobs. Britain's newest tall ship has left Portsmouth today on its maiden voyage. The Stavros Esniakos, built with £3 million of lottery money, will be used by the Sail Training Association to teach youngsters new skills. Jackie Copestake reports.
Moving into a new era of sail training, the Stavros Esniakos has 45 young people aboard, aged between 16 and 24. Some of them have no experience of sailing at all.
Starboard 5. Yeah, that's it.
During the next sort of 2 weeks, we'll put them in watches. They'll be keeping watches. They'll get to know like the language of the ship, what they're meant to do, their duties.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, really. You don't do it every day.
I'm really excited, but at the same time, I'm really sort of a bit scared.
This definitely isn't a challenge for the faint-hearted. Most of the young people will have to climb up the rigging about 100 feet to unfurl the sails in any weather conditions.
This multi-million-pound brig replaces the association's ageing schooner, the Malcolm Miller. Jackie Copestake for BBC South Today in Portsmouth.
Now football, and Saints bounced back from last week's defeat at Spurs with a win over Aston Villa. Saints moved 7 points clear of relegation trouble. Grant Coleman reports.
Southampton's first win in 5 games, created by solid defending. Saints continually got players behind the ball to deny Aston Villa, who had dominated possession in the first half, but who did not have a single shot on goal. At the other end, Kevin Davis, who hadn't scored in the previous 7, netted with Southampton's only 2 attempts on target. Villa's first defeat in 13 league games, only the second Premiership double for Saints, who moved 7 points clear of the bottom 3. Southampton 2, Aston Villa 0.
Celebrations too for Portsmouth. They beat Crewe by 3-1 and move up 1 place to 20th in Division 1. Roger Johnson reports.
This victory was never really in any doubt after Steve Claridge fired Portsmouth ahead with his 8th goal in 9 games, the country's quickest strike of the day. The dominance stuttered though as Colin Cram rifled Crewe's equaliser, but the confidence crucially never dipped, and Thomas Torgerson's deflected shot quickly restored the lead. Kevin Harper's first goal for the club made the points certain, and Pompey took another big step towards safety. It finished Crewe 1, Portsmouth 3.
In Division 2, Bournemouth recorded only their 5th away win of the season. They beat Brentford 2-0. Also in Division 2, disappointment for Reading. They were beaten 3-0 away at Burnley. In Division 3, 2 goals from Paul Rogers helped Brighton to a 3-1 victory over Lincoln City. Now let's have a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be chilly with a slight frost by dawn. Temperatures will fall to 1 Celsius. Tomorrow will be dry with sunny spells. Top temperatures round about 12 Celsius. And don't forget that South of Westminster is on at 1 o'clock tomorrow on BBC 2. Our next bulletin at 5:35 tomorrow evening. Join us then if you can. Otherwise, goodbye from us for now. Bye-bye.